All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things I like about doing this show from home, as opposed to traveling to meet people, it was very nice that I, for years, would be able to go and actually hang out with bands, in their jam space or in the back of a car or a rooftop or whatever. But I feel like I'm being introduced to more new bands because I'm doing the show more frequently now that I'm at home and doing it over Zoom. So obviously, it's not a good thing to come out of the pandemic, but it's kind of a, because the pandemic sucks. But it's sort of like an added an added positive, I guess, in the situation everyone's dealing with. So the band that I have on the episode today is new to me and also new, as far as I understand, too, to the local music scene. You have an EP that's just come out, and I'm sure you have a lot of things. We have a lot of things to talk about. But before we get into that, if the four of you want to introduce yourselves and just maybe mention what you do in the band, that'll help people put a name to the voice.
Sure. I guess I'll start.
Sure.
I'm Ian. I play bass and a bit of synth.
I'm Marco. I play guitar.
I'm Rachel. I sing and I play guitar.
I'm Riley. I play drums.
And so how long has this actually been around? Because I feel like I've just started hearing about you relatively recently on social media and stuff, but I get the feeling that you've been at least working on this for a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
just before this, I went back on like Rachel's Instagram and scrolled almost 3 years back to see like the first time her and I jammed.
Yeah.
So it's been in the works for quite some time, but I guess like took a year to solidify this lineup roughly.
Okay.
Yeah, it took me about 2 years to have all my harassing towards Marco to come to fruition, so he would agree to play with me. So yeah.
Well, and it's a weird time to put a band together too, right? I mean, the fact that the past 2 years have been kind of, well, showless for one thing. I mean, no one's been able to even go to shows or let alone play them, and sort of a lot of uncertainty. So what has it been like for the four of you sort of putting this project together, and then having an EP ready to release in a time when everything's sort of up in the air?
Well, it was kind of crazy because when we started this, it was prior to the first lockdown, so we had no idea what was going to happen. And we had shows coming up that we were really excited for, and then lockdown hit, and then it all got, put to the side for a while. So it's, in a way, it's been good for us because it's allowed us to tighten up and work on new material. We were able to record, and now we feel more prepared than ever to really do shows. So it was kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Were you able to get together a lot during the lockdowns, or was that mostly done remotely?
Not really at all.
Yeah, I guess there were like a couple multi-month stretches where we didn't do anything at all. Yeah. But like
when we were allowed to keep it in a bubble,
yeah,
we did, for sure.
Yeah, so when the restrictions permitted it, we did it. But I guess one blessing in disguise of this whole thing is that like I jumped into home recording, which was something that I always kind of wanted to do, but always put off just because it seemed like the learning curve was really intimidating. But I finally did that, which like allowed us to do our demos, which ended up preparing us to go to the studio to record what was eventually our EP. So in a way, I think that sort of accelerated things.
Yeah.
In a kind of weird roundabout way.
That makes a lot of sense for sure. Just getting that extra experience of doing it on your own. Do you like, how long have these songs been around? Do they feel old to you yet at this point? Because you've had this kind of off period where you haven't been able to get out and play them and get out and release them.
Well, we're already writing new stuff, so the stuff that we're releasing right now to us is old, but it's brand new to everyone else, right?
Sure.
So
we're gonna keep playing it.
Yeah.
We hate it at this point.
But it's cool to see the evolution of our sound from when we started to where we're at now.
Okay.
And it's in a way it's kind of sad because it doesn't really allow us to like truly be super stoked and on it with the present recordings that we have. Like, not to, negate any kind of, true love that we have for these recordings.
Yeah.
Them and we still love them, but that feeling when you're starting to write new stuff and you're getting excited about it, that's what we're having right now for the new stuff. So we're probably gonna hit the recording studio like ASAP
Cool.
after the release. So
Sure.
Well, one thing that I mean, most of you have a background at playing pretty heavy stuff, right? I mean, and then this is different. It has heaviness to it for sure, but I mean, it's very, from what I've heard anyway, very atmospheric and kind of. I mean, it's dark and gloomy, but not in the kind of pulverizing sort of way that I think that some of you might be known for. So, what is the where does this sound originate with the four of you?
that's been the biggest question for all of us, really. You know, it's always kind of funny. We'll be at practice and it'll be a new conversation that happens with someone from, you know, like a different time that week, and they'll say, oh yeah, so and so asked me what our genre is.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I think we just all really enjoy enough diversity in music. Like, we're not metal purists, you know, we
Elitist.
yeah. But and it's funny because technically we aren't metal at all. It's just it's like it leans a little bit into doom, but it's pretty heavy new wave, but it's also very singer-songwriter. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but I definitely we should all give a lot of credit to Marco for being the brainchild of this project. So
Yeah.
it's all the full brain.
Well, maybe that's a question for you then. What do you consider it? I mean, if it's your brainchild, how do you define it? And I know everyone hates defining genres, and it sucks, but we're like in this era now where everything is defined down to like the smallest little subgenre because people are putting it on playlists and all that kind of shit, right? So what do you, I mean, as the brainchild of this project, do you have a Cole's Notes kind of way to define what it is you guys do?
I guess like the genre title we've been going with is doomwave, because I think that sort of encapsulates, like, there's kind of a dichotomy. There's like the heavy side, the doomy part of us, and then there's the wave part, the like very 80s inspired, post-punk, synthy, whatever side.
Chorus, silk guitar.
Yeah, just chorus on everything. And I think like when Rachel first approached me to start this band, like the artists that she named would be like Chelsea Wolfe, Emma Ruth Rundle, like something along those lines where it's like metal adjacent, but not necessarily full on metal, but still really atmospheric. And just based on that, that just sort of was the seed that guided the writing initially. But like I think on one of her first jams, I just did something with a pedal that sounded kind of cheesy in the 80s, and then we were both like, oh, like, you like Drab Majesty too? Yeah. And so then it was like, it just kind of went in that direction, and we just kind of stuck with it.
Cool. Well, I know that the what we just talked about the pandemic and the lack of shows and all that, but do you think that the sound that you have may be difficult to define, 80s kind of thing with the metal adjacent, all the descriptions we just used, is that going to make it easier for you to find shows because it's a little less specifically one thing? I mean, do you think that you're more versatile in terms of who you can play with?
Totally.
I think so.
We hope so. It's kind of one of those things that I guess it could be a double-edged sword. It's like on one hand it's really good for us, but then on the other hand it's like, where do we put these guys?
Like our show and our second show coming up. I mean, just look at the diversity of those two bills.
Yeah. Our first show is a goth show. Show number 2 is a punk show. We could easily, I think, fit in with like a metal show too, like which I think opens up a lot of doors. Because it's just like, also I enjoy shows when there's variety. Like, I love death metal, but sometimes it's cool when it's not just 4 death metal bands
For sure.
together. So I don't know, sprinkle some of this or some of that. And I think just in general it's cool when there's variety on a bill. So yeah, I don't see an issue with us fitting in on and with pretty much anything. I mean, there may be some limits, but
playing with whoever.
Yeah.
Like,
Penner, hit us up.
Yeah, Fred Penner.
That would actually be awesome. It'd be really cool. So, and not to dwell too much on the 80s influence, but I mean, that's an era that often gets kind of maligned for having very specific sounds. Like there's certain instrumental sounds that people immediately peg as like this is 80s, extremely 80s, and it either goes one way or the other. People love it or they just automatically tune out. And I think that the chorus soap guitar maybe is one of those things that kind of has that post-punk sort of 80s vibe. What is the appeal of that sort of era and sound for you?
I don't know.
I just think of all my favorite 80s bands, and they typically fall in line with that. Like, I love Tears for Fears.
Mhm.
I love Depeche Mode.
The Cure.
The Cure, you know, and it all has that kind of vibe. But then on the other side of it, I also really like some of those weird bands from the 80s, like Concrete Blonde, or
Yeah.
just I typically found myself leaning in really hard to strong female vocalists, but also really into like those really atmospheric new wavy kind of bands too. So I think that's kind of where my end of like the writing in the project came from.
Okay.
But that's just me. Like, everyone here has brought such a different dynamic to this project, which I think is why it's so weird. It just happened to be a happy accident, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one of the words I end up using way too much on the show, but I really like it, is nebulous. I think that maybe suits what you guys are doing. It's not. I just like saying nebulous a lot. It sounds fun, but it's just not. Yeah, it's not easy to pigeonhole. As far as the, I guess the overall sound, though, I mean, when you're playing heavier music than like in previous bands and things like that, I guess the emotional side of things is fairly obvious because of just kind of the power behind everything and the aggression and all that. What is it like? And this is maybe as far as vocals, this might be a good question. Is how do you express emotion differently in music like this, which is all about kind of feel, it seems, rather than just kind of hitting you over the head instrument wise and vocal wise?
I don't know. Like, I just always feel like the voice is such an interesting instrument in the way that it is really hard to recreate it like you could with like an instrument, like
Yeah.
a musical instrument. So for me, a lot of it is just emoting. You know, I find a lot of solace in singing. I find a lot of therapy in it. So I think that naturally for me, when I'm singing, it's going to be a little bit more on the lines of emotion rather than technique. But I've also been in choir my whole life, and
Right.
have had vocal lessons. So, not to take away from, the people who have helped me along the way in my vocal journey, but like ultimately it's about emotion and emoting that
Cool.
energy. But that's
What?
just,
No, for sure. What about the rest of you? I mean, is playing something like this, which is, again, it seems very much about like the aesthetic, almost. Is it different than playing something, extremely heavy or faster or more kind of technical?
I think for me, like having played, like my main band was a death metal band for years, and so coming into this, it's definitely a change of pace. But I think there's like there's different kinds of heaviness, right? And I think it's also though it may be like less heavy, and you would kind of make the assumption that therefore it is less emotive or whatever. I feel like because you're not like focusing so much on the technical things you're trying to play, you can kind of really get into it,
Yeah.
and kind of invest yourself emotionally even more than you would if you're trying to, keep up with a 200 BPM blast beat or whatever. So, so yeah, I don't know. I get like satisfaction of it, maybe in a different way. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a different kind of heavy, I guess.
Yeah.
It's technical in its own aspect.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All the layers, and if you're playing a delayed part and you make a mistake, that note rings out many
Sure.
times after.
Yeah, you can't hide it, I guess, right? It's not over in a quarter of a second like if you're playing something that's extremely fast. Yeah. What is the songs you've recorded, are they the recorded versions, are they the same as it would be live? Like, are you able to reproduce all of that the same way live, or do you play it differently? I mean, again, because there's a lot of effects going on and things like delays and stuff like that. Is that are you able to reproduce that on stage, or is it a slightly different version?
For the most part, yes.
I guess the only thing would be the synth.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there's like vocal harmonies too that aren't there, but it's not really, I don't think it would ever be a situation where someone was like, oh, that was really disappointing because,
Yeah.
you can't like split her vocals into chord, I'm working on it though. I'm trying.
I think we want to be able to like reproduce that sound in a live setting too, like, and not have it super overproduced and like layers that we can't reproduce live. But yeah, I guess just the synth, I can't play bass and synth at the same time. So
Is that something you've considered bringing in, like having a synth player for a show, or do you like it sort of with the four of you in the current configuration?
I'm sure we'll consider it in the future, but this is coming up on our second show ever.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's out of the picture. Like, it could happen, but
I don't
We'll
think
see.
we have enough room on the couch for that.
yeah, maybe it won't.
Yeah,
Actually.
this is small enough. Yeah. We don't want to break keyboard.
Well, with the EP out, and again, like, you haven't played very many shows yet. What is the do you have a kind of a gauge on what people's reception is? People who have heard, whether it's a single or whether they've, by the time they hear this, they've seen you live or whatever. Do you have any kind of handle on what people think of this project so far?
I think people are kind of surprised.
So far, yeah.
Like, just based on our band history, people are kind of like,
Oh, yeah,
this
yeah.
is not what I was expecting.
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
they'll say like, oh, that sounded like a heavy Tears for Fears or whatever, which is kind of like, yeah, we've been trying to figure out, like, who do we sound like? And it's like The Cure and Black Sabbath, like, that doesn't make sense, or, so.
I think the general consensus that we've come to is if Deftones and Depeche Mode or Dram Majesty had a love child.
That's cool. That evokes something for sure. Whether people can figure out what that means, they definitely makes you think like, oh, okay, what does that sound like for sure? So if people are hearing you for the first time on this podcast, what's the best way to sort of follow what you're doing? Obviously, listening to the EP is the preferred choice, right? But if they want to, the good thing about this being a podcast is someone could hear it the day it comes out, or they could hear it a year from now. So what's the best way to sort of keep in touch with what you're up to as far as shows, as far as new releases, things like that?
I guess like Instagram, like just I guess Facebook too. We're on all the streaming platforms, so kind of the usual spots these days. I guess that's usually the case.
Is is your EP just a digital release, or are you doing physical copies as well?
We're open to the idea of doing physical copies down the road if there's a demand for it. I mean, there's always a demand, but we just want to kind of gauge what that demand is. So for the time being, we're releasing it digitally. So if you do want to purchase it, that would be through Bandcamp, but feel free to stream it also. We've heard these songs so often, we just want them out there. We want people to hear them. So
you want to get on to the next ones, right? Obviously, you already worked on it. Yeah. Has not to dwell on that too much, but has the sound changed dramatically with the new stuff you're working on compared to these? I don't want to call them old songs because they're new, but has the band progressed a lot in that time between the two?
I would say that they've matured.
Okay.
If anything, like, it's still the same vibe, but it's just a little bit more. It's like, it's matured. It's like we've kind of like found
sophisticated.
Sophisticated, yeah.
Totally.
We found the vibe that we want. And the other ones, like, there's certain songs like on the old one, like Flora and Fauna, that kind of stick out. Weird. Like, it's like, oh, this doesn't really sound like the rest of the album, but that's kind of when we were getting our feet wet and like the traction of what we wanted to sound like. But I think it's really important to this is funny because I'm always like, oh, let's do other ones, but I think it's super important to honor those songs because it was a part of your journey, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to release those and have them there, but it's definitely gonna be a different sound than some of those particular tracks.
I like how you're already calling it the old one.
I know, it's so funny.
This brand new record is the old one.
Yeah. This pandemic.
What is your sort of short-term plan for once you're able to get out there and do more shows and have the record heard by people? Do you have sort of an idea of what your plan is going forward, assuming things don't go to shit again with the COVID?
Yeah,
shoot for the stars.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we were kind of talking about it. It's like, man, things seem to be going well right now. There's got to be like another lockdown looming right around the corner. But yeah, like I guess we've been so focused on just releasing the EP, we haven't like really have the chance to have a like definitive concrete plan. This is what we're doing next. We have studio time booked or whatever. But I personally like the idea of like trying to release music frequently, so whether that means just like singles or EPs, just because it is a lot of work too, and it's tough to be show ready and work on stuff for the studio and all that at the same time. So I like the idea of just releasing fewer songs more frequently, but who knows, maybe an album is the right thing for us next, but I guess we have to figure that out. But for now, it's just playing shows and kind of trying to get out there.